So should you hire a CPA? Well, that's what I'm going to be talking about today, because there's a lot of discussion that I've seen recently whether you need a CPA or even a professional tax preparer or not. But I'm going to give you some reasons why you should, maybe some reasons why you shouldn't, and go into depths about self-prepared software. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is TurboTax. TurboTax, or the company that owns TurboTax, is Intuit. They're getting sued by the FTC for deceptive advertising practices. Yeah, so they've been advertising every tax season that their TurboTax software is free. It's free to file for people, and they've even advertised on my own channel, on my own freaking videos, that TurboTax is free. But what's really happens is you go to use the TurboTax software, you go through the entire process of entering all your data into the software, getting your information in there, and at the end they'll say, oh, actually you don't qualify for the free version, you have to pay this much. See, so the problem is the free version is only for a select few people, relatively small amount of people in terms of who qualifies for it. That kind of deceptive advertising practice has been coming under scrutiny by the FTC, so the FTC did sue them for that. And honestly, that is pretty shady. You make somebody go through all that work to find out that it's not actually free. You have to meet a very certain and specific criteria for it to be free. So I'm glad the FTC is cracking down on that, and I really hate that they've been doing that to people. The other thing you should know is that Intuit also acquired the company Credit Karma. So now, if you can really kind of start to put the pieces together, I might sound like a tinfoil hat person, but if TurboTax collects all your personal information, like social security address, your family's information, their social security address, birthday, and they have this debt company, Credit Karma, that heavily pushes debt, like credit cards and loans and stuff, now they have all your information. They might try to sneakily sell you debt products, whether it's in the TurboTax software or in the future, through email, through phone call, through mailers. Just something to keep in mind when you're using the TurboTax software, because they now own Credit Karma as well. So besides all that, there are some problems with filing taxes yourself, in that you just don't know all the tax law. I mean, not even the most experienced CPAs, attorneys, or enrolled agents know all of the tax law, but they sure as hell know a lot more than you do. Okay, so maybe it'll be okay to file your taxes by yourself if you have a W-2 or maybe a couple W-2s, and that's about it, or maybe a few simple things, maybe some interest income. But once you go beyond a certain threshold, it definitely is worth hiring a professional to file your taxes, just because there is so much tax law. There's just so much tax law. There's no way you could be able to consider everything if you're not living or working in the field full time. Now, there's definitely some instances where when you file by yourself, you can get a lower tax bill or a bigger refund. The primary reason I see for that happening is because people will do things illegally, or things that they're not supposed to. You're going through the software, you see that you owe maybe $1,000. Oh shoot, how do I get that down? Oh, well, I can put some expenses here in the business expense category. Even though I don't own a business, if I put expenses here, it's gonna lower my tax bill. Oh, it's gonna get me a refund. Let's just find more expenses to put in there. That's what I see happen a lot, and why people sometimes will get a larger refund when they file by themselves versus hiring a professional, because the professional will do it correctly, hopefully. They'll do it by the law and correctly, versus you are just seeing this tax liability number slowly drop as you enter more and more expenses when you shouldn't be taking those deductions. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So with that being said, why should you hire a tax professional? Well, it's not just data entry. Sure, if you have a few W-2s or maybe some interest income, that's about it. That might be data entry, but it really isn't. Data entry is part of it. Knowing the tax law and knowing the intricacies behind the scenes is a huge other part. It's like, the iceberg above the surface, that's like the data entry part. And everything below the surface of the water is the tax law knowledge that tax professionals should be accustomed to when preparing taxes. For example, CPAs are required to take at least 40 hours of continuing education per year. Now, people in tax, CPAs in tax, will probably spend the majority of those hours on tax-related subjects. Enrolled agents are required to take at least 24 hours per year. Still pretty significant. Whereas you, a normal taxpayer, are not required to take any. You might do some Googling, you might read some articles on Forbes or Business Week or whatever the hell, but that is not actual continuing education. Some of these CE classes go really in depth about tax laws and how they're applied. When you have professionals who live and breathe taxes, you know that they just know things that you just won't. They'll just know things. And they'll have the tools to research, they'll have the tools to prepare your taxes efficiently. They know what questions to ask when it comes to more complicated matters. It's just much better once you have a slightly more complicated return. Tax professionals also should have tax planning services where they help you as a taxpayer reduce your tax liability. Now, tax planning is not done after the year's done, okay? If I'm preparing a tax return in March of 2022 for the 2021 year, and I prepare your taxes, and I send you the draft of your tax return, and I say, hey, maybe you should contribute to your HSA if you want to reduce your taxes. That's not actually tax planning. That's just little simple, obvious things that maybe you should do. Tax planning is done during the year, before the year is done, because you have a lot more power and a lot more flexibility to do things and to make moves that will help you during the year. Tax planning also can help you set up certain circumstances to put you in a better position. Like if you're trying to sell property, you should probably consult with your tax professional before you do it, because there might be certain things that you could do and set up before you sell the property to make it more advantageous, okay? So usually if you have a lot of property, if you have a lot of stocks or investments, definitely consult with professionals before you make any moves on them, just to be sure you don't screw yourself by acting too quickly. Now, obviously, I talked a lot of good things about tax preparers. There's a lot of bad things too, and a lot of shady tax preparers. But of course, before that, it would be awesome if you subscribe to my channel and like this video if you find it helpful. All right, so not all tax preparers are created the same. There's CPAs, there's enrolled agents, attorneys, and there are non-licensed tax preparers. And everybody in those four buckets have, exceptional quality people and terrible people, even CPAs and EAs. So not all tax preparers are created equal. They're not all the same. They're not all as knowledgeable as each other. I would really be careful with unlicensed preparers because, there's no continuing education requirement or very little, and there's no emphasis on tax law there. If you're a CPA, like I told you, you need 40 hours per year. EA needs 24 per year. An unlicensed preparer, all they have to do is take like a short workshop before they can get their IRS ptin, and I'll explain to you what that is in a little bit. But a shockingly short workshop in order to become a professional preparer, which is just so absurd to me. So be very careful with unlicensed preparers, and I would say just stick with CPAs and EAs if possible. Now, when it comes to CPAs, EAs, or even unlicensed people, you do get what you pay for. If it's somebody who is just doing this as their side hustle, or they may be doing it seasonally, part-time, and they are only charging like $150 or $200 per tax return, I would be very weary about this person because they're only doing it part-time. They're not living and breathing taxes. Also be wary of whether or not they have a PTIN or not. So a PTIN is a Preparer's Tax Identification Number. This is issued by the IRS. This means that you, as a professional, are allowed to prepare taxes for other people and e-file for other people. If you come to somebody and they don't have a ptin, then I would run from them real quick, because they could be filing returns and marking it as self-prepared, which means they are basically not liable in the eyes of the IRS to any mistakes they make, and they're not, officially conducting business as a professional. So I would definitely run from those people as fast as you can. Another thing to be wary about is how loose a preparer is with the tax law. I've seen some scary shit from prior preparers that we've inherited clients from these other preparers who have taken tremendous liberties with tax laws, which just don't make sense at all. So, while we as a firm are pretty aggressive with tax law, we still make sure we stay within the boundaries of the law. And if things are unsure, we have a discussion within our team of CPAs about it to make sure we are interpreting the situation correctly, interpreting the law correctly before we move forward, okay? Because there's a lot that can go behind the scenes that could be a little gray area. I would also avoid preparers who are strictly refund focused. Like if their selling point is I can get you a better refund than that other person, I would run from them too, because sure, you might be able to get a better refund, but are you doing it legally? If you're just solely refund focused, you might not be doing it legally. And it was kind of like the situation I explained to you about TurboTax, where you can just start adding business deductions just for the hell of it to get your income down to get you a larger tax refund. So run from preparers who are refund focused. And the last thing I want to touch on are preparers who charge a contingency-based fee. What that means is they charge a fee based on how big of a refund they can get you. Now that is very, very unethical. That will obviously also be a huge conflict of interest in terms of the law and you as a taxpayer or client, because they're going to try to get you the largest refund in order to get paid the most, irregardless of any tax law. So run from any preparers that charge a contingency-based fee. All right, so that's all I got for today. Thanks for joining me on the day after tax season. It might not be the day after when you watch this, but it is for me. But yeah, thanks for watching. Again, if you're new here, please consider subscribing to my channel. And if you are not new here, thanks for joining me again. And of course, smash the like button if you found this video helpful. And please do share with your friends and family who you might think may find it helpful. All right, so take care for now. Stay safe. I'll see you next week.
I hit the function, hit the rose till I hiccup. I hit the stage and leave with money that's a sticker. She picture perfect, so I told him I'm a flicker.